Like in sub-Saharan Africa, we see as few as one pathologist per million people, which is,
that
you can
is
imagine,
incredible. One per million.
We're already touching the lives of 120,000 people. Like for me, even 2 years ago, that was kind of inconceivable. This year, we're going to touch the lives of 250,000 people, you know.
Donal, thank you very much for coming in to us today.
Thank you.
You must be extremely busy with everything that's going on at the moment. And congratulations on the big round.
Yeah, well, obviously we're really happy to be able to announce the 30 million plus raise, or Series C raise for Deciphex. But obviously, you know, it's something we've been working on for a very, very long time. It's a year in the making, I would think, all in. And ultimately, I suppose to some extent for people involved in these processes, it's somewhat of a relief rather than any sort of euphoria to get these raises completed and over the line.
Taking back to 2017 and you're starting on this journey, what gave you the confidence to go out by yourself and co-found it and really feel like it was a scratch worth itching?
Yeah, well, I suppose the story goes way, way back to probably somewhere around 1998, where I met the professor of pathology in UCD, the late Professor Peter Dervin, and he kind of took me under his wing. I did a postdoctoral research program with him, started looking at pathology for the first time. I was basically a bioprocess engineer by trade, so I didn't know one end of a pathology slide from the other. We were using, at the time, very rudimentary, as you can imagine, the innovation and technology and the performance of technology over that time. We were looking at very rudimentary capabilities to measure things in breast biopsies and try and correlate those measurements with outcomes or findings. And for me, it just opened up a whole new world of interest and excitement. You know, I'd done nothing in the medical arena prior to that. Following that, I actually went back into academia, ended up in Dublin City University as an academic. I was teaching bioprocess engineering, but at the same time, I managed to kind of continue my interest in pathology. I was able to recruit a couple of postgraduate students who were working on innovation around pathology from a digital innovation point of view. And as part of that journey, those people grew up, got their postgraduate degrees, and we started thinking about what next. And we founded a company called SlidePath in 2003, a DCU campus company. And we again started, I was still teaching. We grew and scaled that through 2008, 2009. We were just in the cusp of raising capital at that point, which is, obviously we know what happened in 2008. But thankfully, we met some kindred spirits in a company called Genetics out of the UK. They really liked the synergies of what we brought to the table and what we'd innovated around. And they were in a position to acquire the business in 2009. And, interestingly, I left my academic position. So it was the first time I was truly corporate, so to speak, after all of that experience, and joined the management team of Genetics. And within a year of that, and through working with them and integrating our SlidePath platform into their solution, we managed to sell that company to a big US multinational called Danaher, who are a major life science and diagnostics player. So as I said, I went from teaching students to the sort of US corporate boardroom set up in probably 36 months. And that was quite the kind of transition,
If anybody ever says you can't go from academia to industry, well, there you go.
That's
that's your case study there, right?
Yeah, but I also think that as I saw SlidePath develop and innovate, I could also see my own career progression interests kind of gravitate towards that. And, for me, I'm a researcher, I'm an innovator, and my ability to deploy capital in research and innovation, I felt was actually better served in the commercial arena than it was in the academic arena. And I could innovate faster and more aggressively in that landscape,
Please give me 30 seconds of your time. It blows my mind that only 9% of listeners actually subscribe to our podcast. I'm going to ask you one favor. If you like and enjoy this podcast, please can you subscribe? That one thing will really, really help us and the team get you the very, very best guests. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So tell me about the product. How are you helping people? Because I know you were off air, you were telling me that there's kind of two tracks that your journey's going on. Now, fundamentally, for people listening in, how is your product helping people and society at the
Yeah,
moment?
and I suppose Deciphex is all about pathology, and pathology is all about the analysis of tissue samples and the assessment of whether those tissue samples have disease or not. And I suppose putting it into a bit more kind of layman's talk, I suppose everybody in our life at some point will have a lump or a bump or a colonoscopy or an endoscopy. There will be a sample taken and that sample will be sent to the lab, right? And the lab effectively is pathology, right? And within pathology, you have some of the brightest clinicians, in my view, assessing those materials, looking at the disease processes within your tissues, and ultimately then trying to adjudicate on what the best outcome is for that patient, what's the best treatment options for that patient, how they'll respond to various therapies. So it's quite a complex journey that little sample takes from the point somebody just cuts off a little lump or bump to where you get a report back at the end. And the good news is that for people who do get biopsies taken is that there's a very, very low frequency of severe disease and things that people worry about, like cancer incidents and so on and so forth. But ultimately, when you get that answer, you need to know that your biopsy has been looked at really, really carefully and that the correct treatment options are laid out correctly in front of you as a result.
And how can AI be used to help the user in that journey or the experience in the
Yeah,
experience?
and from our point of view, I think what we're looking at worldwide at the moment is a real global supply demand problem. I think that as medicine evolves and innovates, there's more and more points of interaction and more biopsies being generated, right? So for every head of capita in this country or the UK or the US, there's more materials per person being generated every year than people, if that makes sense. So whatever population growth is driving, then there's more biopsies per people, on top of that. We're also dealing with an aging population across the general Western economies. And as a result, cancer and other diseases of that nature are diseases of the old, right? You know what I mean? Or older people tend to be more susceptible to those diseases. So in essence, the combination of increasing populations, increasing aging of those populations, and increasing complexity of healthcare, is driving a tsunami of materials and biopsies and other procedures that are lending themselves to examination. And then on the flip side, we have this other interesting dynamic, which is pathology isn't being taken up to the extent that it may have in the past by clinicians. So in other words, trainee people doing medicine today
Why is
are
that?
less likely to go into. I think there might be a bit of a vicious circle here in terms of things like some of the imaging modalities like radiology and pathology. People are looking at them going, oh, well, AI will be able to, if they can find cars in pictures today and find birds or cats in pictures, ultimately it'll be able to find cancer, so perhaps there's a little bit of that. It's also a really intellectually challenging subject matter. And for as I said, I always say that pathologists are some of the most intelligent people I meet every day. You know what I mean? So because they have to know so much context, all the way from the fundamental sciences all the way through to the clinical impact of what they're seeing. So from my point of view, it's hard. It's susceptible to erosion by AI in the future. And I think people are probably opting towards more personalized healthcare or healthcare subspecialties where they get to interact more with patients, perhaps. You know what I mean? So I think probably those three factors, but ultimately one way or the other, we've got a problem, right? Which is effectively lots and lots of materials being generated and fewer pathologists to report those. Like in sub-Saharan Africa, we see as few as one pathologist per million people, which is, if you
That
could
is
imagine, yeah.
incredible.
And
One per million.
the opportunities to get a timely diagnosis on a cancer case could be months. Could like so, and time is key. Time is fundamental because if you think about it, you've got a cancer, it's growing, it's developing, it's progressing, and yet you're waiting for the next step in your treatment plan. So and that's contingent on pathology. So for us to get that accelerated is fundamentally really, really
Because
important.
depending on the cancer, every month can add like an extra 10% likelihood of dying of mortality, depending on it. So it's
Well, I
incredible.
won't give the absolute black and white stats on that, but you're correct that basically, slower intervention on disease processes generally means poorer outcomes.
Do you see this turning into an augmentation where it's, so we go to radiology, it's the kind of radiologist working with AI, and you kind of see that kind of dovetailing is a wonderful example, even you can see in the Matter or how the Beacon, how they're using it. Do you see that as an augmentation, or do you see it as, well, there's going to be autonomous AI where it's going to be working on parts of it and then humans for a different part, or do you see that kind of co-intelligence, or how do you see this kind of playing out?
I think if you think about it, the ultimate evolution of the pathologist is an integrator of data. So what I mean by that is they take all of the inputs, they take, let's say, the best academic literature, they take the morphology or the visual appearance of the materials that they're assessing, they take all of the secondary assessments, the biochemical testing and various other things that are done on those materials, or molecular testing, and you've got a big chunk of data that then you need to consider in kind of collective, and then you integrate that and you provide an integrated report for your patient effectively. So we see that as the higher value function, if that makes sense, within pathology. The lower value function are things like the morphology. You know what I mean? So, for example, if we can accurately determine that we see inflammation or a cancer process in a tissue, and we can say that to a high definitive sense, our ability to put that data in front of the pathologist as part of their inputs, if that makes sense, to an overall report is going to be really, really impactful. I think that's going to be a gradual process because, as we know, health systems and healthcare is probably always the technology adoption laggard, and that's largely driven fundamentally out of a patient safety consideration, right? They're not going to be, right, let's try this experimental test on a patient. They want to qualify it, they want to make sure it's validated, they want to make sure that it goes through the appropriate regulatory processes, for example. So bearing all that in mind, as much as the innovation exists today, it would be a gradual process of adoption where people, as you say, even like generalized AI today, we're using it in a very co-pilot mode. We say, let's improve this email, let's do this.
Yeah.
It's
baby steps.
Yeah, and it's baby steps. And what we're finding is we're using it, for example, to optimize workload balancing. We're able to make sure that one of our pathologists doesn't get 10 hard cases in a row, for example. We're able to kind of balance the workload and make sure that they're getting an appropriate mix of complexities of cases. We're able to double read now on colorectal cases, where we're able to, colorectal biopsies are very, very prevalent on the basis of colorectal screening programs, which yield those biopsies effectively. So for us, our ability now to be able to double check effectively the outcome of a colorectal pathology report using AI, and to help pathologists flag maybe occasional minor discordances, is a massive safety step. You know what I mean? So it's not replacing the pathologist, but it's just making the quality of the pathologist's work more. It's just elevating that. And we look at it like Six Sigma, like aircraft, right? People get on aircraft every day because they know that there's a 1 in 10 million chance potentially of that plane crashing, and that they feel safe and comfortable with that risk tolerance. What we're trying to do is up the number of sigmas in diagnostic quality, again using AI to again improve patient outcomes, but also, as I said already, anything we can do to help with ergonomics and with AI to help pathologists report more efficiently. If you think about it, and a lot of it is just simple logistics and picking up bits of paper, putting them down, picking up slides, putting them down, doing all of that through a digital ecosystem adds a huge amount of ergonomic value. We see up to 40% better ergonomics through the use of our system as a reporting aid. As a result, our pathologists are able to read 40% more safely without necessarily, getting fatigued or tired or working overtime or the like.
Because unless you're in this industry or it day to day, people are under so much pressure. They're struggling to keep up. And the fatigue that actually is going to impact their decision making as well. So you need that technology act as an enabler. When you're fundamentally trying to improve what you do and how you do it, did you notice over the last couple of years there is a kind of a dominoes effect where you initially got better results, or is it collectively, was there a big bang moment? How have you kind of seen it?
I think it is a war of inches, to be honest, and we see that day to day. I think that there's a combination of factors that affect that, right? First of all, if you look at AI's ability to to deliver accurate predictions, at the granularity that a pathologist can deliver them. AI is largely data intensive. And, I think we've seen huge innovations recently whereby if you throw the world's data at a model, the models will start to do interesting and useful things. We've seen that all the time now with OpenAI and Anthropic and these type of organizations. Healthcare data is more challenging, right? Because first of all, it's your data, it's the patient's data, right?
Why is it so challenging? Because you've got so many different versions of the truth. If people aren't in this field, why is healthcare data particularly difficult?
Well, first of all, it's out of respect to the patient that consent is a key requirement, and if you look at all of the progression around, let's say, things like the EU AI Act, GDPR, various other factors, and the patient's right to opt out and so on and so forth, the provision of that data, these things have a major impact. It's not like you can just walk into a hospital and take all their data without getting ethical approval or so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So first of all, access to really, really good quality data is a major challenge for innovation. The second thing is that, as I said earlier on in the conversation, the incidence rate of severe disease is quite low. So if for example, if you take 100 colorectal biopsies, 3 of those will actually contain cancer. So a lot of people think, oh my God, there must be a higher ratio, but it's actually that's that low, right? So, and if you think about saying, I want something to accurately determine cancer, you need thousands and thousands of colorectal biopsies to find those 3 per 100 that are there to give an adequate representation of these low frequency diagnoses in the data set. So if you think about it, the challenge really is that the scale of data is largely down to the fact that it's the rare things that are the most valuable things to figure out, and the rare things are rare. You know what I mean? So obviously in terms of data sets, you need more and more data. So that's one aspect. I think the other piece is, we're also seeing innovations in model architectures and in the whole AI technical ecosystem effectively, whereby people are continuously proposing new architectures, new strategies, vision transformers, other things of this nature that can ultimately be used to deliver more and more bang for buck with less and less data, if that makes sense. So if you think about it, on one side, it's about increasing your data, and on the other side, it's about leveraging the latest innovations in AI that will use less data. At some point, you'll hit a convergence point, where you have enough data and the models are suitably sophisticated.
Because it's hard to believe that we're actually running out of data, where if you look 2 or 3, 4 years ago, everyone was talking about the explosion of data.
Yeah.
What do you think of synthetic data and actually going on that journey?
It's a very, very interesting thing, and we've obviously looked at it from a cursory point of view internally. And ultimately, it is a value, but ultimately in our industry, as I said, there's a baseline of like, as I said, there may be data sets. We may have 20, 30, 40,000 clinical cases, and we may have no example of a particular endpoint in that data set. So you can't synthesize something you don't have or don't have any baseline examples of, right? You know what I mean? So to that effect, we still value the acquisition and integration of ever increasing data sets. But we're very, very excited now by innovations around pathology foundational models, which are very much more based on the principle of, if we know today that all of this picture recognition stuff is still based on a thing called ImageNet, and that was trained on pictures of cats and birds.
That was the big moment, though, wasn't it? ImageNet for me was like the big bang. It all kind of happened after that. And you do have people talking about it, but I don't think it gets enough credit in terms of the foundation.
The visual arena or visual recognition arena, it's still very fundamentally important. But like at that point in time, we're now looking at foundational models that are trained on pathology data, which is hugely different parameters, right? You know what I mean? And we feel that we can build better foundational models that then, fundamentally understand pathology, to a much greater extent.
This is where I feel it's going to go per sector, because they've got your own love language of these different data sets, and then you're kind of learning from it. And it probably allows for the small language models to really kind of kick in as well in some cases, because you've got that more specific data set, because you don't necessarily want to be training on all this other data sets but it's not actually relevant to you. So I'm sure you're going to get an awful lot more accuracy from the model as well, because you're giving that kind of like-minded.
Agreed. And look, I think that the way to think about it, I suppose, to some extent, is that the large generalized models for starters from an application landscape will focus on the applications of highest ROI, and those will be largely in terms of administrative function, agents, these type of activities. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, as we look ahead, these type of, I would call them niche in the context of the larger players. These type of niche application areas are require more specialist data. And the key point is that if, for example, that data is not in the public domain, where is it to be sourced? You know what I mean? And we spend a ton of our time working with our collaborators, our clinical partners around the world. We work, for example, with 25 NHS trusts in the UK, many of whom support our AI development programs and provide us with supporting data for that purpose, because they see the long-term benefit of safety and quality and better turnaround time for their patients in those collaborations. But those collaborations are not open to everybody, because you need to have a really, really high problem context before you can even entertain the conversation. You know what I mean? It's like you need to know why you need their data. You need to understand the subtlety of that to engage at a level with them.
So you've been always very focused on that international context from day one to scale and to grow. And from an Irish perspective, entrepreneurs don't necessarily have that mindset. I was always of the belief when I co-founded all this was we were going to go North America and Europe, and that was going to be our area. What advice would you offer within the ecosystem where companies who are going to start on an AI journey or introducing an AI product to market or trying to get that fit right, and in general, that kind of ecosystem for success? Is there any kind of telltale signs you would share to those founders? Or maybe on the flip side, what have you seen going wrong and you can pinpoint to say, well, actually, that's because of these reasons?
Yeah, well, the first thing, and I think I said it to you earlier as well, was that, we set up the business very much with a core expertise and a global network of partners and interactions that we could at least start to discuss strategy with and how we progress. And our early forays were into the pharmaceutical markets, where we had some really, really good international collaborators, and all of pharma research and development largely is not here, right? You know what I mean? So when we set up a business here, we had no choice but to just simply say we're a global business and we have to engage globally. And I think, Ireland as an ecosystem is really, really impactful from that point of view, because if you set up a company in the UK or in the US, they're your core markets, right? Whereas an Irish company, immediately has the scale factor to contend with and has to be very much globally focused straight out of the gate. So that would be my first comment, is that, I would say you have to figure it out probably in an international market before you figure it out here, unless your business is incredibly focused on the Irish market for some reason or another, right? I think that my perspective on this is very simple. It is very much about global scale, bigger markets. We're very focused this coming year now in terms of entering the US clinical diagnostics market, and we're investing heavily into that market as part of this financing to show growth and scale there. We've done that in the UK. We're reporting over 120,000 clinical cases a year for the NHS, which is a massive achievement in less than 2.5 years. You know what I mean? To go from 0 to 120,000 cases reporting, and we'll probably get as high as 250,000 in the coming year. Just as a 250,000 people we're impacting on worldwide. You know what I mean? In terms of getting a diagnosis to them faster, quicker, and more efficiently.
So from a business perspective, then you've now got to the company to a certain size. You've now got the investment. You want to go to the next stage. How do you start to make yourself redundant in your current role and then start to strategically grow that out, but also start to think in a different way for that global scale? Are you on that journey at the moment? Because for what you've done now is probably not going to get you to where you need to go.
Yeah, I think that, the period of time I spent between my academic career in Danaher was a huge education. I was working with lots of US MBAs, getting my own MBA in School of Life, so to speak, in that period. And, really helped me understand, I suppose, how businesses operate at scale and how ultimately they globalize as well, particularly on the commercial side. And for me, that was a huge education. And I was able to take a lot of that into my founder experience as well. And I suppose even out of the gate, it probably wasn't a conventional founder where I was, bootstrapping it or doing this or doing that. Like, I was always about building a team and always about putting the right people in the right seats. And I would say it's, even today, it's still my core function in the business to make sure that the organization is functioning. I'm kind of taking the grinding the gears, so to speak, kind of figuring out where the challenges are, addressing those through the introduction of the right team, and also, the way we look at it as a business, scaling at a rate where we're kind of always like last year's performance is this year's growth, if that makes sense. So every year it's a completely new start, a completely new challenge, and a much bigger hill to climb. And we really, like, my sense is that we almost have to rethink it all once a year. Do you know what I mean? And restructure
is
it.
That difficult to do? Because you've obviously got a success point. Anyone who knows what it's like to get to a success point, you don't want to rock the boat whatsoever. So how do you challenge yourself and the team, or maybe get the team to challenge you to try to kind of reimagine that? Or not necessarily reimagine it, you're just reinventing certain aspects of it.
Yeah, I think that, it always brings challenge, and it's very, very hard to what do they say, kind of snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. We're coming off the back of a great year. We've scaled the business hugely. We've raised lots of capital. We've introduced new international VCs to our cap table. We've opened up new market opportunities. We've done lots of amazing things, but we almost have to say, look, forget about that. It's done. Right, next step, go back to the basics. We're already behind in terms of doubling our business, right? So it's that mentality, and it does, as I said, it isn't an incremental thing. I think it's almost like a restructuring, an annual restructuring of the business, or even multi-annually restructuring the business to deal with the emerging problems, and not sitting on problems long, fixing them quickly, addressing them as quickly as you can possibly address them. And scaling the team, really important, because without context, and you need a huge amount of contribution at leadership level. You need a high context. We're going into multiple markets concurrently. We almost need lots of kind of CEOs within the business, the CEO of the individual business units, different geos, different segments. Everybody needs to own their own problem and be really, really focused on execution. So yeah, it's quite a challenge, and it does involve a lot of recasting of the business, quite aggressively over time.
What will you be most proud of if you've achieved it before you die of your work within healthcare?
Yeah, I think that for me, and it is actually an interesting part of our business right now. We're starting to see to what extent we go back to that one pathologist per million people in sub-Saharan Africa, right? We are extremely focused as an organization on outreach and on strategically trying to improve not only the kind of developed economies, but to look at low and middle income economies and see how we can better improve the improvement benefits are so much more impactful in those marketplaces, or in those healthcare regions. I suppose we don't really call them marketplaces per se. But from my point of view, I think that if we see our AI and our technology supporting better care globally, we see it every day. We've seen cases come through our network that we've reported quickly and efficiently that were dangerous cases and had a time sensitivity. But I think if you think about it, like, we're already touching the lives of 120,000 people. Like, for me, even 2 years ago, that was kind of inconceivable. This year, we're going to touch the lives of 250,000 people. I think 1 million is an interesting number, just in the context of, our development as a company. The year that we would report or read 1 million biopsies or 1 million samples globally would be a really exciting measure for me, because it's you're impacting on 1 million lives, you're impacting on I think that the big challenge we see, no matter whether the news is good news, which it normally is, or bad news, It's the waiting. It's the fact that somebody has a procedure today and they could be waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks for a result. We want to get that down to a day, and we do that routinely. We're a 1 day turnaround time reporting service in the UK, for example. And you can imagine then the weeks of emotional burden that are on a million people, waiting for a result, that we're confident that using AI, that result is of high confidence and high quality. And ultimately, if we can reach an impact level like that, I think that would be something really, really exciting from our point of view.
Donal O'Shea, CEO of Deciphex, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Mark Kelly, founder of AI Ireland. We're passionate about collaboration and sharing the incredible stories behind every AI journey. That's why we're always looking for guests to join our in-person AI Ireland podcast experience. If you're working on innovative AI projects or have a story that can inspire others, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to share your insights, experiences and ideas with a really vibrant community that's as excited about AI as you are. So if you're ready to be part of this conversation and help shape the future of AI in Ireland, please get in touch today. We can't wait to collaborate with you. Thank you.